A special thank you, since I know that we're already 2 weeks into summer break for most of you, so I know this is not part of your normal routine. Thank you for being here. Let's start off with some introductions. Just could you share your name, your school, its location, and the grade you're either in or teaching?
Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Kurt Russell from the state of Ohio. I teach in a town called Oberlin, and I teach history. And I'm the 2022 National Teacher of the Year. So it's an honor to be here.
I'm Sean Steinmetz. I'm a student here at Oakdale. Just finished ninth grade.
Hi. Hi, my name is Lisa Kopka. I'm a middle school math teacher at Thomas Pyle Middle School in Bethesda, Maryland. I'm honored to be here and excited to have this open, candid conversation with everyone.
Hi, I'm Anaya Verk, and I'm going to be in 10th grade after this summer.
Good afternoon. I'm Amanda Portner, literacy specialist and reading intervention teacher at Thurmont Middle School here in Frederick County, Maryland. Also excited to start this conversation today.
Hi, I'm Tiago Hardy. I go here at Oakdale, and I'm going into 10th grade.
Awesome. Thank you all again for being here. So I want to start out by asking you a bit about where we are now, or at least where we were in the school year that just wrapped up. A lot of people have been describing that as the first normal school year after the pandemic's disruption. I wonder if the students could start out by telling us, did it feel normal to you? Or what challenges were you and your teachers still dealing with? And Sean, you're a wrestler. I know you can take the pressure, so I'm going to start with you.
All right. It definitely felt like a fresh start, especially for our class, because we moved to a new school. We're high schoolers now, coming from middle school. I felt like a lot of the COVID restrictions were lifted and changed. A lot of people, like the mask policies, were changed as well. So it definitely felt like a more normal school year, and especially because of the entrance to high school, it felt like a fresh start. We could kind of forget about COVID and move on to newer and better things.
Anaya, Tiago, how would you build on that?
I agree with Sean. It definitely felt like a fresh start because, especially here at Oakdale, there's such a strong sense of community. So it really allows you to find your people. And I remember in COVID, I was really antisocial. I didn't talk to anyone. I had my mask on the whole time like everyone else, and I didn't know anybody. So I think this school year definitely felt like back to normal and finding your new normal.
I agree with both of them. It was definitely a fresh start. Coming from COVID, not being able to talk to anyone, being a new student, it was kind of hard for me. But after I was introduced to the new system and everything, and getting introduced to all the new peers and stuff, I made a lot of new friends, and it helped me get introduced to school.
It's an interesting observation that you all are making in relation to the results that we just saw and the timing of the data collection, because really these data were collected in the first third, really the first quarter of this past school year. And if you're saying that this year was the one where really it finally felt like a return to normal, maybe it's not a surprise that we're still seeing scores as low as they were and no real signs of recovery. Maybe we need to wait a bit to see that. To the educators on the panel, I wonder to what extent you saw this as a normal year, or whether instead you were still seeing the effects of the pandemic in your classrooms. What does that look like? And we'll start with you, Kurt.
I have to be honest, this year was different. I did not teach this year. I was on sabbatical, traveling. But from my observation, just traveling the nation, the one thing that I did notice and what teachers are going through, that it was not a normal school year. There was still issues that affected teachers that I think we need to name. Number one, I think we need to name that teachers were struggling emotionally this year. And by struggling emotionally, it's always been my position that if teachers are not well, then students are not well. And so the normalcy that I was accustomed to prior to the pandemic, when I was in the classroom, has been lost. And there's several factors for that. Policies have affected teachers from feeling normal. Students facing trauma has affected teachers from being normal. And so teachers are struggling, and teachers are really trying to, grasp the joy back in education.
piggyback on what Kurt said, this year felt as normal as it could be, but it was really hard year in the beginning. My current school finally kind of recovered the staff shortage. I remember a year before that, I had to cover every class. There was no substitute, so every teacher has to recover the gaps in learning while having zero planning time, covering other classes. Doing that for a whole year takes really a big toll. Just emotionally, a lot of the teachers are also, parents themselves. So it was really difficult juggling work and being a parent. But this year, students, I have to give them a credit. They are resilient, they're adaptive. They can quickly, adapt to situation. But as an adult, as a teacher, we have a lot more responsibility than just educating students. And that's kind of piggyback on, being a parent, making sure that I'm being a good parent while being a good teacher. It's, definitely overwhelming. But at the same time, it's not surprising that we have a lot of turnover because some teachers are, retiring on time as opposed to extending. But those who actually survive to teach another day, we are prepared, we are ready, and hopeful that things will return to what it was to be.
I like how Sean said we came back to a new normal. I would almost say we came back to a completely different normal. We knew what teaching was traditionally, and then we went home for the pandemic. And teachers changed what teaching had been for 50, 70 years in about 2 days. And so we reorganized the systemic approach of education to be online teachers, to be distance learning teachers for a year and a half. And then to come back in person was a redefinition of what education was and should be again. We had used online strategies and had changed the way we presented information and had students respond, and then had to redefine that again when they were back in front of us full force. So I think it was a new normal, but it was a completely different normal than what we traditionally relied upon. And I think that has been a source of stress for educators because we're continuing to have to engage, capitalize on a different student who's sitting in front of us. And that has been exciting, but it's also been challenging because they're not students that we have known previously. And so we're learning who they are and what they demand and how they want to be taught and how they need to be taught, which might not have sat with how we presented our instruction. And so that's been a knee-jerk reaction for teachers to say, I have to learn how to do this differently. So normal, yes, but I think we have to redefine what normal looks like these days.
So each of you, go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And which is an excellent point. I love the words you use, teachers and student evolved, that evolution. And even though it seems as the statistics seems grim, I think one thing that we really have to say was positive is the evolution of teachers and students, how we evolved over time and how we continue to evolve. And it brings such joy to see these young students here on the panel who are equipped to be resilient and to evolve each and every time a new circumstance arises, because this won't be the last, right? We know that with education, there's going to be something else that comes about, and we have to continue to evolve. And that's the one thing that I'm really, really proud of in terms of education with students and teachers is that evolution. So thank you for mentioning that.
So picking up on that theme of evolution, in light of the challenges that students are facing in terms of mastery of basic skills that Dr. Carr just helped us understand, part of that evolution has been coming up with strategies to address learning gaps. It surely has been the case. Students, I wonder, sort of, what have you seen to be the most helpful strategies or actions your schools or your teachers have taken to help you catch up after the pandemic, help you and your peers get back on track?
Well, one thing over the course of the pandemic that changed because of it that is helping us now is that a lot of my teachers, especially the older teachers, they got better with technology. During the pandemic, a lot of the teachers, like some of them couldn't really figure out Zoom or Google Meet or whatever, and I feel like that's where that gap came from. They weren't as efficient, but now they've got great resources. Like I don't know if you guys ever use like Kahoot or GimKit, but I've seen a lot of older teachers who had a hard time adapting, but once they did, they've used them. They used them effectively. I think that teachers are going they're going faster now, and they're really reinforcing what they're teaching.
I also think, especially during this school year, me personally and a ton of my friends and other peers who were struggling in class, sometimes it is hard, especially coming back from fully online, to pay attention in class and retain all the information that you were learning in class. But here we have, like, after school, we have a thing called Bear Den, because we're Oakdale Bears, and basically there's a ton of volunteer teachers that just reteach stuff that you learned or help you with your homework, and it like helps you retain it a lot better than like sitting in a full classroom. And I think that personally really helped me and a ton of my other peers.
Are these teachers from outside the school?
No,
or
they're Oakdale teachers.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Yeah, and Tiago.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. I like how they added the fact that we're implementing technology, like the Chromebooks, that really help. Because without them, we wouldn't be able to do virtual learning. And this thing we have Bear Den, where we have like students, like upperclassmen, like seniors, juniors, and they come down and help lowerclassmen like me in algebra-based physics. I probably wouldn't have gone through without Bear Den.
Interesting. So thinking about peer tutoring as a strategy to expand the instructional resources of the school. How about you all on the teacher side? What have you seen work, and perhaps as important, what have you seen not work? Lisa, you're a math teacher. That's where we saw these sort of learning gaps in the middle school grades have been largest. How are you handling that?
I'm happy that the students are kind of candidly saying that the technology is part of their learning, and I'm also a very strong proponent to incorporating technology into instructions, because that's, you have to meet the students where they are. And I've been actually using, different kind of Kahoot, Pear Deck, Nearpod, different technology to really have a live participation that, students who raise their hand aren't the ones who are participating, but everyone can participate at the same time with the live feedback using technology. That was given, well, I guess in a way, kind of forcefully during COVID, but I learned to use digital medium, and my students love it, because they always kind of look for, if I say this, or write responses, written responses, because math discourse is important, and students have access to that. Everyone have a voice when they're typing, and they type faster than writing by hand. But however, there's definitely a learning curve. Not all math teachers are on board, because it is a big learning curve to learn the software and download it and upload it. But I think technology is definitely a direction that all educators should embrace. Using appropriate, I think it gives me hope that technology can really enhance learning in mathematics. But professional development to give the time and the support the teachers need to have that embrace, I think it's also important, because not everyone can easily learn technology just because it's good for the students. You need to provide that time, and not during the time the teachers are using to grading their work, but extra time to provide that support. Otherwise, it's gonna be managing 45-minute of planning time to do everything you're asked to do on top of learning how to do something new for the first time, and that can be really challenging. Like, for the older teachers, that's really, really hard. So I'm glad you guys brought that up.
And Amanda, as a reading specialist, addressing learning gaps has been part of your work for some time, even before the pandemic. So
It has, and I'm going to speak for the older teachers, because I believe that is me. But I want to talk about a strategy too that's a little old school, but I feel like something we've definitely shifted to more has been the importance of relationship building with students. And I spoke before the panel about how during the pandemic, when we think this is very old school, so reach way back, when we think about Maslow's hierarchy, that first foundational step is safety, security, the basic functionality of being humans. And that was rattled so significantly during the pandemic for teachers, for parents, for students, that I think that's kind of shifted our focus as educators to say, we have to know our kids. We've all gone through a lot, And so it's really important for us to reach out and make those connections with our students and make those relationships with our students as people. And that has been a shift for several educators to make, because I'm used to treating them as students and then humans, and then I'll teach them. And I think we've kind of changed the directionality of that. I need to look at them as humans first, as Dr. Carr said, the whole child. And then no matter what tool I throw at them, if it's paper, pencil, if it's GimKit, if it's something different that I'm asking the students to stretch, if they know that they're safe in my classroom, that they're trusted and they're respected and they're valued, they'll perform, they'll achieve, they'll meet me. And so I think we've kind of said, hey, this whole shift has come back to making sure that that student is known in your classroom. And I think that that helps struggling students. I work with students who are struggling readers. I think when they know they're safe and that I'm aware of their struggles and that I'm here to work with them on those struggles, it saves half the battle, because they know that I'm there for them and I'm there to help make those skills become a little bit more rote and a little bit more kind to them as students. And I think that's kind of something that we dismiss, is the human connection, but I think it's so valuable in education today.
Which is an excellent point. And everything that was mentioned thus far been absolutely on point. Technology, engagement, building relationship. But if I could just push back just a little bit and really talk about the one thing that we, like, it's the big elephant in the room, is that in order for us as educators, as a community of learners to grow, is that teachers have to be trusted. And the expertise of teachers have to be at the forefront. And that's the thing that has been missing during these past few years, where teachers have not had that empowerment to be trusted in the classroom, to provide the education that is worthy of all students, to provide that equity work, that inclusive work that some school districts are missing and that some school districts do not have. And that's the issue that is at the forefront of some of this loss, is that teachers are not trusted. And not trusted by whom? It could be from community members, it could be from administrators, it could be from policymakers. And so when we start trusting teachers to be experts, that's when you will see a great shift of learning for all.
Thanks for sharing that, Kurt. I want to take the conversation slightly back to sort of recovery strategies narrowly understood, while acknowledging the importance of the more general point. A lot of people, as they look at the current situation, say we need to find a way to get students more time on task, to expand instructional time, whether that's longer days, whether that's additional tutoring, whether that's time over school breaks or over the summer, that maybe that would put us in a position to do both the relationship building and the academic work that's needed. Do you all share that analysis? Is time part of the strategy that we need to be thinking about here, making time the variable? And students, what would you think about that idea?
I fully don't like that. I disagree with the longer days or the I understand that I feel like there should be more educational options for the students. I don't know if I like longer days so much, but I feel like if you're forcing the students to be there longer, those of us that are understanding what we need to understand, that's gonna put them off. They're not gonna be paying more attention. I think it should be really optional time. So those students that are struggling, if they can will themselves to go be at school for longer, or to go to stuff like Bear Den, which I'm sure Tiago has a lot of experience with, it really helps those students, and it doesn't disadvantage other students.
So optional, if at all. I hear a strong vote for that.
Yeah. Well, optional's good.
Yeah. Anyone else want to react?
Yeah, I agree with him. I definitely don't like the idea of having longer hours at school, because that will only make things for mental health and that kind of thing for kids worse, and that will only drop test scores. And I think to improve the quality of our test scores, we can improve the quality of our classrooms, quality over quantity, you know?
Well, I'll speak to the elephant in the room. I'm not sure that more time is the answer. I think the efficient use of time might be something to examine more specifically. And I'll speak to standardized testing. There is a significant amount of instructional time that is lost to 8, 12, 14 days of standardized testing. And that's something that we're all measured by. We all live in that culture. We all live in that world, but we need to be truthful about the time that it's consuming. And so I think that that's something, that's a way to look at a different use of time. I'm not sure that saying if you're going to spend this much time with standardized testing, then we need to add this many days on the back end. I'm not sure that that's good for students. I'm not sure that that's good for parents and families. I don't know that that's good for educators. I think it might just be, maybe we examine how the school day is used in a different way. You know, we have students from this time to this time. Are we maximizing the time that they're in our classrooms as best as we can? Is it a differentiated approach, the way Sean said? Is it these students need this amount of time for the recovery of these skills, but these students do not? And so maybe a day is not just a 4-period day or a 7-period day for some students. Maybe it's a 3-period day, maybe it's a 6-period day. We've never fluctuated a schedule in such a fashion. Why can't we be flexible in looking at how we use the time that they're with us? So I think there are ways to look at things within the confines of the schedule that we currently have without adding minutes to the schedule. Why can't we look at the structure we have and say, how can it be more efficient?
Kurt, you've had a chance to see a lot of different schools around the nation as National Teacher of the Year. How do you think about the time issue?
Yes, you know, similar to what everyone is saying, arbitrary, just having time is not useful. I think we need to reimagine education, all right? Reimagine the setup and the system of education in a way that it benefits students. And so I always had this philosophy that mastery of the subject is what is needed. And so if a student master a subject or a item within 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and we could have specific data on that. Let's reimagine education where those students are able to maybe have some type of internship or learning outside of the school. We always believe that 4 walls constitutes learning, like these brick and mortar is just learning, but learning is outside of these walls. So allow students to gain that experience as well once that mastery has been achieved. So that's what I'm really focusing on.
So make learning the constant and time the variable.
Yes.
And that could free up flexibility in both directions, right?
Of course.
Yeah. Anaya.
I was just gonna say, like, I completely agree with Tiago and like what everyone else was saying, that it's not that we need more days or more hours. I think it's definitely like quality over quantity. I think especially with test results and that kind of stuff, the problem is motivation in students, because I feel like when we take these tests, we don't really want to try. Like and when we sit in these classrooms, especially after COVID, we were sitting in our rooms, most of us were on our beds all day, and we didn't want to try. We didn't want to like actually get up and like learn these functions or like practice new vocabulary, that kind of stuff. We didn't want to do it. So when it comes to state testing, we were sitting in these rooms for like hours. We didn't put our best effort, and I think a ton of peers can agree to that. Motivation was really lacking, and so I think if we really put that idea forth between like educators and students, that you need to try. This is important. Your education is important. I think you'll see better results.
And so what will it take to re-engage students in their learning in an active way? I think you're right that there are all sorts of indicators. Dr. Carr shared one of them today, just the share of students who read for fun on their own at all-time lows. That's just one of many potential indicators of a lack of student engagement and motivation. If that is solving that problem is really central to supporting recovery, how can we go about doing it?
Well, what Mr. Russell said was a departure from traditional teaching strategies. I think that'd be really helpful. I mean, if you add more time, give more time to a teacher for him to drone at me for another 10 minutes, I checked out 30 minutes ago. That's not changing anything. So if I'm already gone, we need to diversify the teaching strategies we use, the teaching resources we use. I really think that a change and some innovation could help re-engage students and make us more active learners.
And we saw some examples of that with Lisa, your use of technology you were mentioning earlier.
So during COVID, our classroom size got significantly reduced. So typically in algebra classes in middle school, because it's considered an accelerated course, I have maximum capacity of students, like 34 students in the classroom. So I have about 150 students I see every day, which is quite a lot. But during COVID, I actually had about 19 to 20 students, very small classrooms. You'd be surprised. I know this is kind of a dream, but small classroom, small student-teacher ratio makes a big difference. During the COVID years with a significant gap, I don't think I've ever been as close to my students as during those COVID years because the classroom was so small, like 19 to 20 students. I was able to really expand being creative. We had a special project about quadratic songs where students came with the instruments and demonstrate their mastery through different musics. I tried the same strategy that worked wonderfully during COVID recovery year. This school year did not work in the class of 35. So there are things that allow you to be more creative and innovative in a small teacher-student ratio that cannot translate to a big, classroom. And of course, when you have 150 students, amount of emails the students or parents you get, the time it becomes incredibly smaller. It would be great. I think there will be more room for the educators to be inspired and be innovative if the classroom size was a lot smaller and have more planning time to really collaborate and be creative.
Yeah, all right. Amanda?
Well, I'm going to go back to what you said because Dr. Carr broke my heart a little bit with the information about reading for enjoyment. And I'm going to throw this out to everyone here and to everyone online. Where are the models for reading for entertainment? Are you modeling this? And I will check myself because I often have to put down my phone. I have to turn off the binge watching. I have to make sure that I'm using self-discipline to read for 20 minutes for myself and something that's not educationally minded, something that's not solely for the use of my classroom. I have to check myself to do that. Are we doing that for our kids? And I would say in every venue, as parents, as community members, as teachers, do we pause once a week to say, hey guys, what are you reading? And let's talk about it. And there's not a blessed book report or a book log or a reading log attached to it. We are reading for fun and we are talking about it and we are bringing that joy back to reading. And someone said, they had asked the question online, what are they reading? I don't care. I don't care what they're reading. I don't care what book they've checked out. I don't care what fan fiction they're reading online, as long as it is reading for entertainment and reading for enjoyment. I use this analogy all the time. If you want to be a distance runner, what do you have to do to become a distance runner? You have to run. And I use this in my own life because I am not a distance runner, nor do I plan to be one. So I don't spend a lot of time running, but I do want to be a better reader. And how do I do that? I read more and I read differently and I read with my students, I read with my colleagues, I read with my friends in the community, and I talk about that with kids. And so I think one of the strangest, easiest things that we can do is model that for our kids. And so I think that's something that we have to think about because oftentimes I've been doing this for a really long time. I am the old teacher and I've heard a lot of times, why are you just reading in your classroom? And the fact that that is qualified by the word just breaks my English teacher and reading teacher heart. I'm not just reading. I'm reading, and I'm showing students the importance of reading. And that's an instructional strategy that's so valuable in so many ways. Whether it be in my classroom, Mr. Russell's classroom, or the math classroom, it's something that's integral to how we learn is by reading. And so I think that that's something that we have to shift in terms of modeling it and also to remove the stigma from it. So I think if we do both of those things, that's something that's very easy for us to demonstrate as adults to change the culture of that.
That's so powerful. It was Anaya who brought the topic of engagement into the conversation and was saying, how do we show students the importance of their education so that they'll invest in it. And one way to think about that is that we model how we respect the behaviors that need to be engaged in order to become an educated citizen. Any other thoughts on the engagement topic?
Yes, education for those who are in the profession, of course, should be student-centered. And so to go off the question, how do we engage students? Well, we engage students by allowing students to see themselves in the curriculum. So if students don't see themselves in the curriculum, in the things that we are teaching, then of course there's a barrier. I teach history, and so a hot topic for today, of course. But the one thing that I try to do each and every day is to show my students possibilities. Possibilities. And how do you show students possibilities? Everything that I teach, I make sure it's layered within the images of all of my students. Whether it's my black students, my white students, my gay students, my straight students, my students on the spectrum, my students not on the spectrum, so forth and so on. So every student see themselves in the curriculum. And you could do that across the disciplines, right? You could show students themselves within ELA. You could show students themselves in a math class, in a science class. And that's how you engage students. That's how I was engaged in kindergarten. Miss Francine Toss, my kindergarten teacher, this white lady who read a book about Martin Luther King Jr. and how I got engaged to become a learner, a lifelong learner. So when you see yourself, you see possibilities, that's when you become engaged.
I actually, I understand what you're getting at with the importance of reading, but I find that my teachers in the past and of right now, especially my language arts teachers, they've always considered reading to be only a hardcover book or a paperback book that they're gonna shove your nose into. But I think that if you vary it with like research projects into current study stuff and internet articles, that's how a lot of people get their reading done. I know you teach history, you could try to relate historical events to current events through those articles or through stuff on the internet today. And I think that they should vary their reading materials in theme as well as like actual reading material.
Great. So I want to actually turn to audience questions in just a moment, and I know there's some coming in from online. But before I do that, there are a lot of policymakers at all levels who pay a lot of attention to NAEP results and think about drawing on them to inform decisions going forward. I'm particularly interested in asking the students, what do you want people like that to know about what you and your fellow students need to feel supported in schools right now?
I think just a good curriculum, something that can really help me master the topic. Like for English, maybe getting enough reading from these articles and stuff, or participating in enough games and things like that can really help me master it.
Interesting. So back to the theme of quality over quantity potentially, or at least in addition to quantity, but quality being key and innovative pedagogy as well. Anaya?
I think you should go to Sean first.
Shawn, all right.
I think that relevance to the students now is a big deal. I feel like I like what Mr. Russell was saying a lot about the different, like the diversity of schools now and the diversity of our communities now. I think that we should be giving more relevant materials to our students. I think that will engage them better, like they were talking about, and I think it would also teach them better just in general.
Okay, I think, like, engaging the students, of course, is probably the most important thing, but back to, like, motivation, I think it's so, like, especially this year, like, if you, in the studies, they were showing, like, chronic absentees, because so many students see school as kind of like an option this year. Like, I would text some of my friends and be like, hey, you coming today? No, I don't feel like it. So it was just like, it wasn't because they were sick, they just didn't feel like it. There was no motivation, and I think the teachers too, they kind of just like, it was so hard on them during COVID, and everyone was trying to readjust this year, and there was such a lack of engagement, and I think there just needs to be like games or just something to really like interest the students in whatever they're learning, science, math, history.
And we'll ask the same question from the teacher perspective. What do you want policymakers to know about what teachers need right now in light of some of the challenges you shared at the start of the conversation, what Anaya just shared right now?
Well, this is a pickle to unravel in 5 short minutes. I think we are in a mental health crisis as a community. I think students in trauma is something that's more pervasive than we've even scratched the surface. And the problem being that teachers are often the first line of defense, and we don't have much to offer. We don't have many resources to offer our students when we know they're struggling and we know they're coming from a place where they need additional supports that we cannot provide in the 47 or the 87 minutes that we have them in class. And we don't have much to pull from behind us in terms of our toolbox for these students who are struggling. And that's difficult for me as a teacher who loves my kids. I want to be able to give them something. I want to throw them a lifeline, and I'm not sure what that lifeline is. They need access to way more counselors than we have available. They need access to mental health services that are continued and that don't require a 6-month waiting period. And those are things that I can't control outside of the classroom, but that trickle so hard into my classroom that I can't deny that that's a factor. So I think as a country, we're really struggling with those systems that are failing our students.
Okay, so I think what Mr. Russell has said earlier about the trust in teachers, I know that a lot of teachers that are retiring or finding another adventure are quitting because partially to that reason. I love teaching. I love being a teacher. Despite the challenges, I will find ways to engage the students and do my absolute best. But sometimes I feel like outside of the teaching profession, whether when another adult put a blame or criticize or put a negative point of view, I think those are the ones that hurts the most. I think it's important to be mindful in the educational community that we all have a shared responsibility. I have a responsibility as an educator, and I will do my absolute best because you don't go into a teaching profession for any other reason. There's no other reason to be a teacher other than that reason, the passion to teach. But students have their own responsibilities to drive their own learning. Even though it's boring, they have the responsibility to do their part. And parents also has the responsibility to make sure that their child is doing their own part. And policymakers, advocates, we all have shared responsibility that we should constantly keep in mind, because I think we are quick to blame, and I think blame doesn't solve anything. We just have to kind of, I know I'm always asking myself, am I doing my best? Is what I say mindful to my students? Do the students know me as well as I know them, so that it's a reciprocal relationship? So I think just building relationship and really keep doing our part of education for our students.
Yes, I totally agree. I echo everything that the panelists mentioned. And at the same time, my charge and my challenge is this. There should not be policy being made without teachers' input. And it's that simple. So if there's policymakers, lawmakers who are discussing education and teachers are not at the table, then to me, that policy is void.
I actually wanted to say I like what you guys are saying about mental health, but I don't think the solution is more counselors. I think it's partly because there's some sort of a stigma to going to talk to a counselor. And no offense to Ms. Balsa, but there are people before her that my counselor's Ms. Balsa. There are people before her that I would talk to if I had an issue, because I don't really feel like I know her that well. I think that we should be expanding resources for after-school programs, for coaches or club leaders. I think that they can act as counselors and therapists in a way that maybe someone with the title of counselor really can't.
It seems like the problem of student mental health is a real one that requires a multifaceted strategy, but clearly more resources in one way or another. Let's turn to the audience, both here and online, and see if we have any questions for our panelists so I don't monopolize the conversation.
There's one over there.
Oh, great.
Again, I just want to thank our teachers and our students so much for being here and sharing your insights with us. And we're talking about standardized tests and how that measures student achievement. But from our students, how do you measure your achievement? And then the second part of that question is, and what motivates you academically?
I think how I measure my achievement on testing is basically just my score compared to last year and to this year, see how much I've improved. That's
Or
all.
he's saying not just testing, just
Okay.
more generally. How do you think about your success as a student?
I think it's just my general knowledge. That's how I would tell.
I think my success, I kind of measure it in the way other people, it's probably not the healthiest way to measure success, but I think the way other people kind of not perceive me per se, but like if someone like if I'm like in a club or something and she's like, oh, include her, she's really smart. It makes me feel good. I'm like, okay, so I must have been talking about something intellectual or something smart to make them like see that I am smart. Or like when a teacher like calls on me to like lead a group discussion or something like that, I find my success in that rather than test scores or something that's made by some random higher up people that I don't know.
And the second part of the question for both of you is what motivates you as a student to succeed academically?
Probably, I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Doesn't appear to be a problem, motivation, but you have to think about where it comes from.
I mean, I'm really competitive, and I have been for most of my life, so I always want to be better than my peers, no offense, and also I want to be better than I was a couple days ago, or better than I was a week ago, or better than I was a year ago. I really measure that progress, like Tiago was saying, by if I can look back and say, before this semester, I got better. Like, I was worse at this skill, that's a big indicator of progress for me.
So you answered both the measurement and the motivation question at once, right? Relative to others, or relative to your own past performance. Other questions, again, from the room or online. Laura, I'll let you jump in when appropriate.
Oh, Peggy's got a question.
I have a question. First of all, I am so impressed with the conversation, the rich conversation here today. I want to ask you about the math results in particular. Thank you. Any hypothesis you might have as to why we're seeing the steeper declines in math as opposed to reading?
Math, I have a quote that I always go by with my students. Math is about being a creative thinker, not a calculator. The basic skills, math is something that you build one towards the other, and math sometimes feels very excluded compared to other subjects. You learn math in math class. You don't often see that in any other classes. Reading is everywhere, including my class. I incorporate reading and writing in my class. However, math sometimes feels like very isolated subject where it's not visited as much in other subjects. Something that I'm trying to work with other departments, but math is sort of isolated in itself. And number sense is something that you develop and build upon, kind of like building a house, like you mentioned, that you have the foundation, that number sense, and you build on abstract thinking, and it's something that you build towards. Now, the students that I had, 7th graders 2 years ago, and I had the luxury to have them as 8th graders, they did have a lot of gaps. And it's not a gap that can close immediately because you still have to teach to the standards of their grade level while closing the gap. Now, I try not to focus too much on the calculation because calculation is something that is not really a critical thinking. It's just arithmetics. So what you do with the calculation, what to calculate to problem solve something that's worth solving, that's where it's important. So I'm not sure, not to say the basic number sense and calculation isn't important. It's something, a gap that can be closed. It's a small problem. Closing a gap of a basic math is something that can be done while addressing the higher order thinking. That's not, something that a calculator can do. Doctor, you mentioned that the calculation, it seems that the test was a basic math, which makes me think it's a basic calculation, a basic measurement, something that can probably be done on the calculator. That's something that, a gap that can be closed. Again, to trust the math teachers that they will attempt to close that gap, but not at the price of critical thinking, real problem solving. So
I hear an argument there for keeping kids advancing at grade level while gradually making up skills that we're missing along the way would be one implication of that interpretation of the response.
I feel like there's an issue of stamina to address as well, and student stamina. And so I can't speak to the math scores so much, but I can speak to test taking stamina as well as instructional educational stamina. You put up a 150 word passage in one of the assessments. That for some students is a challenge, and that's a struggle. And so I may read the first paragraph and stop. And that's an issue of stamina. And I think that that's something that we address through confidence building, through repetition, and through practice. And I feel like that issue was compounded by the pandemic because we didn't have that daily practice and that daily encouragement. And so I've seen a drop in student stamina on a few different fronts, whether it be behavioral, skill-based, tackling something brand new that they've not done before. I don't know, I can't do it, I'm just quitting. And so I feel like that stamina piece is an underlying issue that we need to address as teachers as well, to build that student confidence and to build that student stick-to-itness, to stick to that task, to try it. You got stuck on paragraph 2, you have 6 more paragraphs, let's keep going. Let's keep doing that. And I think that that's something that we have to talk about in building that student capacity again.
I'd like to agree with what she said earlier about creativity. I mean, English, there's creativity in writing, but in math, of course, it's all about creativity, and that was definitely limited when we were in quarantine and in virtual learning. For me specifically, pre-algebra, I didn't have a lot of creativity in my math, and so coming into Algebra 1 and Geometry in 8th grade was a lot harder.
You must have good math teachers who help you see that side of it, because I don't know that everyone would say, first, math is about creativity, so good teachers like Ms. Kopka. Laura, do we have time for one or two from the audience?
I have one question. This is essentially to the students. What do you want, the teachers also can answer, what do you want school to prepare you for?
Well, like real-world relevant applications. I mean, I feel like we should be having more computer science classes now because it's a largely growing field. I think that should probably teach us how to do our taxes at some point, because that's terrible from what I've heard, and I have no clue how to do it. But I think more relevant skills, like I don't need to know about some specific event that happened 200 years ago. That's not going to affect me, really, ever. But something that's really a day-to-day thing, like doing my taxes, or even stuff like more just offering more computer science stuff because it's a big field, like that's going to help prepare us for jobs in the future and for our lives in the future.
I think you just broke Mr. Russell's heart, Sean. So I'm not going to let him respond because we don't have enough time. But Anaya?
I completely agree. I was just going to say the real world. I took a business management class last semester, and it really, like, I've never taken a class like that. I've never been introduced to, like, actual real-world concepts. Like, we did the stock market. We did a stock market game, and it was cool. It was engaging, and I actually learned how stocks work. I had no idea what they were before. And I think just like Sean said, we definitely need more classes just like that. Like, actually learn how to do real-world stuff. And in English classes, maybe, college applications, I think we only really start looking at those in junior year. I think freshman year, sophomore year, we need to learn how to, like, actually do real-world emails. I still don't know how to write a proper email. I think we need to learn that.
All right, so what Sean and I said was basically exactly what I was going to say. That in school we need to focus on real-world problems, like focusing on development of computer science, because that's going to be a big thing in the future, on our career, technology, and engineering programs, things like that, like, and other things that we have to do like real life. I'm not even sure if in school they teach us how to open a checkbook, like that kind of thing, like open a bank account. So,
Laura, do we have time for one more from the crowd? Online.
I think actually that's it.
All right. Well, then I told you all that I was going to end things with one more question of my own, which is, we've spent the past couple of years, or the past year, releasing NAEP results that have been pretty somber in tone, maybe even alarming. We're transitioning into a period where we hope our schools and educators and students will be focused on academic recovery. As you think about that context, what, if anything, gives you hope about the progress that American students and schools can make in the years ahead? Why don't we start with you at the end, Mr. Russell?
Once again, thank you so much for this invitation, this robust conversation. I have hope in the resilience of students, in the innovation of students. That continues to give me hope, and also hope in teachers. Teachers provide that curiosity, the idea of possibilities, and that gives me hope.
I mean, I think I've had great teachers this year. That gives me a lot of hope. I know I hurt Mr. Russell's feelings earlier, but I really love my AP US history teacher, Mr. Smerritt. Like, it got me interested in history, which is a thing I normally wouldn't be.
I also am agreeing that I'm always impressed with the students every year. They give me hope with their creativity and open-mindedness and constantly asking questions. I am ready to answer all their questions. When will I ever use this in real world? I have answers. Sometimes the answer is you probably won't, but the thinking that is required of you, people that you have to work with that you may not like, that I'm putting you with, those are the skills you're gonna need to know in real life as an adult. So I'm hopeful. Students are ready. Students are back in school. They're ready to ask questions, and teachers who are still in the building are there because they're prepared for them. So I'm excited for new school year.
I think I have hope in those passionate educators, the passionate students who are actually, they want to learn, they want to teach, they want to help. I have a lot of hope for that. I had great teachers this year, and you could really see, although they were struggling to engage with the students because a lot of students just didn't want to, they were really trying, and I think that gives me hope.
I think I have hope for the future because if all of us strive together to be the best of ourselves, to be better, then we can have a beautiful future together.
And I think conversations like this give me hope that we have committed students and educators and policymakers and staff that say we've got to keep coming to this table in an honest fashion because we have a lot of problems to solve, but if we put our heads together, we can do that. And so the willingness to have these kind of chats gives me hope.
Well, what a nice concluding comment for a panel. I can't do better than that. Please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their experiences and thoughts with us today. To close, I just want to thank you all for attending, and again, thank Superintendent Dyson, the Frederick County Public Schools, and Oakdale High School for joining us, for hosting us today. Again, the full set of results are available at nationsreportcard.gov, and a recording of this event will soon be posted on the National Assessment Governing Board's website, that's nagb.gov. Whether you're an educator, policymaker, researcher, or a parent, we hope that each of you will explore the results. So with that, thank you, and have a great afternoon.